guys, are you wondering what subjects are on the SAT? Because maybe you're going to be taking it soon and you're wondering, am I even close to prepared? Do I know what I need to know to take this thing? If so, that's what I'm going to talk about in this video today. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone we have an awesome way to prep for the SAT. You can find it at SupertutorTV.com. It's the best SAT prep course ever. It's over 100 hours of video-based prep with me. I scored perfectly on the SAT as an adult. I've also helped students score in the 99th plus percentile to get into colleges like Harvard and other awesome places. So if you want to get the best score you can, it's a great way to go. We also have the best ACT prep course ever if you're prepping for the ACT. And we also have lots of free videos here on YouTube. So no matter who you are, you can sign up for free right now. Just click subscribe below this video. You can also sign up for our free mailing list at SupertutorTV.com/subscribe, and we'll keep you in the loop on everything we've got going on here. And if we have any new products or any new awesome announcements, we will let you guys know first. All right, let's talk SAT subjects. So first of all, just the way the SAT is set up, it's split into two halves for the multiple choice, okay? You've got math, which is worth 800 points. There's a no calculator section, which is a little bit shorter, and a calculator section in which you can use your calculator, and it's a little bit longer. And then we have the reading and writing and language section, and that's actually two different sections, two totally different sections. The first section is evidence-based reading, and that's just your typical reading comprehension questions. You read a passage and then you answer a bunch of questions based on the passage, okay? Then there's also a section called writing and language, which is basically a grammar test. It also is testing something called style and usage, and that means how do you form sentences and paragraphs and essays so that they make a lot of sense and that they're well written. One last note, there's also an optional essay section. The essay is not required. You can sign up for the essay or you can not sign up for the essay. Different schools have different policies in terms of whether they require you to take the essay and whether they require you to submit the essay score if you happen to have taken the essay. So I recommend that you check out the individual schools that you're interested in to see if that's something that might weigh into the mix when you're applying to college. I generally recommend for students applying to top colleges, it's usually a good idea to take that if you can afford it. So let's get started. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail as I go through this video in terms of what is in each section and what you have to be responsible for. So let's talk about what's in the reading test. You're going to be reading one passage from a classic or contemporary work of US or world literature. That means just basically literature. Generally, I find that literature falls into a few different categories. Sometimes it's sort of like multicultural or world literature that's pretty modern. And in other times, it's what I call like classic literature. That means you're looking at probably 19th century novels or something like that. And that's usually British or American literature. Not always. Sometimes you're going to get something that's different, but generally you're going to have sort of like an old-fashioned British or American author. Or you're going to have something that's more modern, but maybe it's by a Pakistani author or an African author or something like that. But it's more world literature, quote unquote. And you're going to have more of a multicultural perspective, okay? The second kind of passage that you're going to have, and it might not be second on the test, it might be last on the test, you never know, would be a historical passage. And those usually are what I call primary sources, meaning that rather than being something like your history book, which is written by a team of authors that compile all the ideas of history and stick them in a big, broad narrative, it's typically an actual document from that historical time period about whatever issue was going on. So for example, it could be a letter from a senator about a controversial issue. It could be a presidential address or speech. Generally, these are either what they call a US founding document, so a huge emphasis here on US history, or it could be something in the great global conversation. So that means it doesn't necessarily have to be from US history. I've seen material that was from like British history or British perspective on Americans. It could be also from anywhere in the world. So it could also be from India or from China, who knows? They could pull it from anywhere as long as it's part of the quote, great global conversation, okay? Next, you're going to have a selection that's sort of social science. It could be economics, psychology, sociology, anything like that. And then finally, you're going to have two science passages. I do not know why the SAT has decided to do double the science passages. Maybe it's to compete with the ACT, which has an entire section devoted to science, but you're going to have more science reading than any other type. That can be earth science, biology, chemistry, or physics. It also sometimes can be technology. And sometimes it's a little more borderline, like natural science, popular science, something that's a little more hip But in any case, that's what you're responsible for reading. Hopefully you're comfortable with all those kinds of readings. What I find the most challenging about the SAT is, if you've noticed, 4 out of 5 of these passages are not literature. So when you think of English class at school, you're usually interpreting literature. That's only one of the 5 things that you're being tested on for reading comprehension. So that makes this a very different test in a lot of ways. For that reason, I would encourage you guys to really prep for this test and don't just assume it's going to be like class. Just because you know the subject doesn't mean you're going to ace it. Okay, let's move on to the writing and language. The writing and language test is basically a grammar test. You basically read sentences, you find mistakes and weaknesses, and then you fix those. Occasionally, you're also going to have what I call a question stem, meaning it's going to say, which of the following would be the best choice, or which of the following would not work, or something like that, right? And in those cases, you need to really pay attention to what the question is asking and answer the question. So sometimes you're just correcting and other times you're answering the question, but it's usually grammar first, style second. I'm gonna just list out here for you guys on our lovely screen several of the grammar areas that you're going to be responsible for knowing. We cover all of these in some way on our online course if you're signed up for that. So if there are words over here that don't make sense to you or you're not sure about, that's one way that you could approach it. Khan Academy also has a lot of free resources. I will warn you though, when it comes to writing and language, I find that the Khan Academy material is usually too easy. So I don't recommend doing the problem sets in Khan Academy, though this list of stuff that the test covers, it would be good for you to know. So that's all grammar. The other thing that the test covers is stuff that's not exactly grammar, and it's more what I would call like style and usage. You need to know how to keep parallel constructions in your sentences. You need to know how to avoid redundancy. You have to know how subordinate and dependent clauses work with independent clauses to form full sentences so that you avoid fragments. You have to know about how to use relative pronouns. That's word like that, which, who, whom, all those kind of words. Then there's also questions that are more about style and strategy, and these can be a little bit more challenging to tackle. Those can cover things like concision and clarity, like which sentence is the clearest, which one is the most direct. Word choice, meaning that you've chosen the best word given the context. Idiomatic use of prepositions, meaning you've chosen the right preposition to go with the right verb. For example, I'm excited about, not I'm excited at. Right? Introductions and conclusions, how do you effectively place those? Long transitions, short transitions, right? Those can be single words or like whole phrases. How do I transition from one element to another? There's also some graph and chart-based evidence questions that sometimes appear in this section. There's questions that we like to call placement questions, which are basically like, where's the best place to put this sentence? There's addition and deletion of sentences and paragraphs, combining sentences and paragraphs, and choose the best sentence or portion according to the context around this sentence. So there's also a lot of sort of stylistic choices that you're going to have to make. Okay, let's move on to the math section now. So the math section is divided into 4 sections, and I'm basically going to give you just a quick rundown, and we'll also list out all the subsections on the right here of what that includes according to the College Board. Again, if this looks like Greek to you and you're on our course by chance, you can download in our download section the content pieces. They'll say content _ here, and those have like a representative sample of all of this content. If you're not on our course, Khan Academy is a great way to kind of punch through and find a representative sample of these as well. They have all of these on Khan Academy, and most of these are like abbreviations of the way it's named on Khan Academy. So you can go check that out there as well. Heart of algebra, that's basically algebra, right? You have to know algebra up and down. And basically it's everything from solving linear equations, that's just equations with variables in them, to inequalities. A few things of note, interpreting linear functions, that's the kind of question that you're not going to see in your regular math class very often. What it is it's a question that requires you to look at a word problem and then look at an equation that models that word problem and then figure out what one value in that setup of the word problem means. So you can see they give you an equation, they give you a setup, and they say, what's 18, right? And you have to figure that out. It's asked in this totally weird backwards way that is like so SAT specific that it can be really confusing. So it's not the kind of thing that you've done in class. If you don't have a lot of time and you're looking for, okay, what do I need to know? I did everything right at school, but I need to get the SAT. That's one that you really should pay attention to. The rest of these are pretty standard, but if you struggle with word problems, as you can see, it's very word problem heavy. You can see almost half of these are word problems, and that's very true to the test. There are tons of word problems on this test. So if you don't like word problems, beware. Maybe check out the ACT. Passport to Advanced Mathematics, that's what I call fancy speak for Algebra 2. So if you haven't had Algebra 2, it's probably not a great idea to take the SAT because you probably aren't ready yet. The next section that the SAT tests is problem solving and data analysis. And these are in decreasing order of importance. So the algebra stuff comes up all the time, but this problem solving and data analysis stuff comes up a little less often. And finally, the additional topics come up way less often, just so you guys know, of those 4 sections. Problem solving and data analysis, a lot of this you're going to have covered actually in pre-algebra. It's stuff like ratios, rates, proportions, percents, percent increase, percent decrease, right? If I buy a sweater and it's 20% off, right? That kind of stuff. But be careful, a lot of these questions are trick questions. Data inferences and data collection and conclusions are 2 areas, again, that are very SAT specific and you may not have done in class, especially if you haven't had AP Stats. So I recommend definitely checking those out either on our course or on Khan Academy so that you know what those are about. And then center spread and shape of distributions, that's basically standard deviation, as well as mean, median, mode, and range. So make sure that you know those terms and kind of have some familiarity with them. Additional topics. This is basically like geometry. And I find it a little bit misleading because the right triangle word problems and the congruence and similarity actually include all sorts of things that you need to know. You need to know about quadrilaterals, not just triangles. You need to know about circles. You need to know all of geometry, basically. You don't have to do any proofs necessarily, but you need to know how to solve any geometry problem for any length or any angle that might occur. It doesn't come up very often, but when it does, it can be pretty challenging. So if you're going for a top score, you still need to know that stuff. If you're not going for a top score, I would say focus on the algebra stuff first. It comes up way more often and it's going to be more bang for your study buck, so to speak. And I think that's it. So there you go. What topics are on the SAT? There it is, all in a nutshell. And if you need help with this, like I said, we've got lots more videos here on YouTube, or we have a course. Do what you need. There's also Khan Academy. We also have self-study videos. There's all sorts of things, resources that you can turn to depending on what resources you have to work with. Good luck to you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.